I think the real point where institutions can get themselves in trouble is when they face these financial problems. And there are lots of reasons for why they exist, and every institution can probably give you several reasons. But I think the real danger is when institutions lose focus of their mission and their vision and start to try and do short-term fixes.
Welcome to Small College America, a podcast dedicated to exploring the role and value of small colleges in higher education landscape. I'm Dean Hoke, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kent Barnes.
Great to see you, Dean. Today we welcome Dr. Jeremiah Williams, a professor of physics at Wittenberg University in Ohio. He's been there since 2007, and he teaches the full spectrum of undergraduate courses in his field and leads an undergraduate-focused research program in plasma physics. He received his Bachelor of Science in Physics and Mathematics from Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, a Master's in Science and Physics from the University of California, Los Angeles, and a PhD in Physics from Auburn University. His area of research is experimental plasma physics with a focus on dusty plasmas, and the National Science Foundation and the United States Department of Energy and NASA have funded his work. He also has been active in intermediate and advanced physics laboratory community. He's been an active member of the American Physical Society, the Division of Physics, the American Association of Physics Teachers, and the Advanced Laboratory Physics Association, where he has served on a variety of committees and task forces. He's currently on detail to the National Science Foundation, where he serves as the program director for the Plasma Physics Program. We are delighted to have you, Dr. Williams, and I'll turn it over to Dean to get the questions started.
Well, very good. But I also must say I have a bit of a prejudice here, just to let everybody know. I'm born and raised in Springfield, Ohio. And so Wittenberg was about a good 6 blocks away from me. So I was born and raised watching Wittenberg and Wittenberg football, by the way. But nice to have you with us on the show. And I think this will be a fun conversation. You've had an impressive academic journey from Dickinson, as Kent said, to UCLA to Auburn before joining Witt in 2007. What drew you to Wittenberg during that time? And furthermore, what kept you there? I mean, that's a long time career at one institution.
Well, I guess it goes back to my undergraduate experience at Dickinson College, which is a small liberal arts college in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. I think like a lot of people when we were applying to college, this is long ago now, I didn't really know what that was, but it seemed like it was a good fit. And I went and I found it to be a really powerful, transformative experience. We were able to work closely with faculty. We were able to get involved in meaningful ways in research. We were able to TA. We had a small cohort that we interacted with, and I found it to be just a good fit for me and something that sort of set me on a good trajectory. And so I went off to graduate school. I finished my master's at UCLA. I realized that being in Los Angeles was not the right fit for me personally. I love Southern California, but LA was just culturally not for me. So I took a couple years off and stumbled into a visiting instructor position at Illinois Wesleyan University in Bloomington, Illinois. And I really loved it. I had an interest in doing that based on my experience as an undergraduate, but being able to sort of work with students and mentor them, work with them in the classroom, sort of guide them as they're taking those intellectual risks to learn and working in the lab doing research, it's addictive. And so I went back and finished my PhD because if you want to do that long term, you need to do that. And after spending several years working deeply in a research project, I really loved that. And so I was looking around thinking what was next. And there were a handful of plasma physicists at small liberal arts colleges. And they were successful. They were able to do good science and do the teaching and the mentoring. And so that sort of motivated me to apply. And then what how I ended up at Wittenberg ultimately was they offered me a job. That's a big part of it. We had a couple of other offers, but you know, between my wife and myself, that sort of was the best fit with the Springfield area. And so that's how we ended up there.
Well, I'm going to follow up a little bit on that.
Yeah.
You seem to have, forgive me, since I'm kind of a small town boy too, that you have a little bit of when you talk about the school that you went to, then you bring up UCLA and you talked about Los Angeles and going, well, that's not really me. At the same time, it seemed to have more of a fit towards a small town, a smaller type of town, not big urban centers. I mean, I'm curious about that a little bit and also within academics and what you maybe even see with some of your students.
I do have a slight preference for smaller towns, but I've lived in several big cities and they've been good experiences. Seattle, for example. And so we just sort of, for me personally, this smaller town is a slightly better fit, but I don't have anything against big cities. Just sort of it was the culture in Los Angeles just didn't mesh well with me. So it wasn't a good fit for me. But one of the things that drew me to Wittenberg and looking at schools like Wittenberg was that it's the smaller size where you can really have meaningful interactions with lots of students. I mean, you can have those at big universities, but I think it is harder to do, and not as many students get to have that experience.
Got it. Ken?
Well, thanks, Jeremiah. And fit is so important. I should just mention that I went to Gettysburg, so I know
Ah,
Dickinson really well. And Illinois Wesleyan is one of Augustana's chief private competitors, so I know them very well. So you've been associated with two really great liberal arts colleges, in addition, of course, to Wittenberg, which I know through the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America network of colleges. So
yep,
it's great to make all of those connections. Currently, you are serving as a program director for the National Science Foundation's Plasma Physics program. How does that experience benefit not only you professionally, but also Wittenberg and Wittenberg students? Could you share an example or two of how your NSF role has created opportunities or insights that you've been able to bring back to campus?
sure. So I think sort of my personal professional benefit ties into the benefit for the university as well as for interactions with faculty colleagues at other small colleges and within the plasma physics community. So the I am in what's known as an IPA or Intergovernmental Personnel Act appointment. So I'm a rotator, and these are people that are brought into federal agencies for a handful of years. They bring in expertise, new ideas, and sort of contribute to whatever program that they're serving as part of. And at the same time, they get to see sort of how the process actually works. And one thing that I have learned in my time at the NSF is that if there is some deep state and I'm part of it, this is who I would want the deep state to be. These are incredibly dedicated, incredibly intelligent, hardworking people that are just keeping the gears turning, keeping things moving. In the case of the National Science Foundation, advancing our statutory defined mission, which is to advance the progress of science. And so, probably the biggest benefit for me personally is I've gotten to see how broad the plasma physics community is and the breadth of research that's done. It spans from low temperature plasmas, which is where I'm in, where there's practical applications like water treatment, plasmas for treating chronic wounds, manufacturing semiconductors, to understanding the environment, space, and how the sun and the planet interact with each other, right? Which is really important if you like your cell phones, right? With all the satellites that we have orbiting, to sort of the extreme environments that you see in space, looking at extreme conditions like how did certain isotopes form at the very beginning of the universe? How do you create really energetic electron beams, right? Just streams of electrons so that you can do next generation particle physics experiments. So I've gotten to see how broad it really is. And of course, when I go back to Wittenberg, all that experience comes with me and it goes back into the classroom, right? And I'm still working with students on research, and those experiences and that perspective comes back, and I think that's really beneficial. Another sort of key benefit is I now really see what the process is because we've done the process of reviewing awards or proposals, making the hard choices as to what gets funded and what doesn't because we have a very limited budget. And we've been able to sort of use that to give advice to faculty colleagues who are in the process of going through the application process to get a grant.
Great. Thank you. I mean, and I really appreciate the fact that broad exposure to
Yeah,
plasma physics, bringing back the ideas of what careers are available to Wittenberg students. That is huge, especially in the type of field in which you're working. So that's really helpful.
Well, let's go down this path a little bit further. I mean, a normal perception is that Wittenberg is primarily known as a liberal arts college and has that as a regular part of its DNA and has had it since the late 1840s, early 1850s. But in your view, what does the kind of education uniquely prepare physics students who may go out in research industry or even careers outside of science? I guess what I'm really asking is the blend of the physics student or the science student and the liberal arts background as all part of that. I'm curious how that
yeah.
works from your point of view.
Well, so I think that a physics major, generally speaking, really prepares you for a wide range of career options. It can be graduate school and becoming a faculty member, right? That's what everyone thinks of when they think about a physics major. But in reality, that is just a very minute fraction of the physics majors that are out there, right? Or physics minors. Most will go off, ultimately get employment outside of academia, right? Some will become high school teachers, some will become engineers, some will really any range, right? Because you have quantitative skills, the ability to break down complex problems into very small pieces. And I think that those are things that employers find very valuable. Now, when you're just getting going, you have to sort of put that into the language that they're looking for because they don't think of a physics major as necessarily being the person that they're looking for their job. But I think one of the things that the liberal arts education adds to that is that it gives you a broader perspective. In addition to having sort of that quantitative analytic ability, you're able to look at it from different perspectives because, as I look back at my liberal arts training at Dickinson, I often think it was sort of wasted on the young. I much more appreciate it now than I did at that point. But taking courses sort of across the spectrum to get that broad-based education allows you to bring those different perspectives. Another thing that I think we do really well, and our alumni say that it's very valuable, is help them develop a lot of the soft skills, communication skills, both written and oral. And one of the dirty secrets of being a faculty member is I spend way more time communicating than I do doing physics, right? Whether it's writing a proposal so that I can support students and give them that experience, or writing a white paper, or putting a memo together, right? There's just lots of writing, and having that practice, I think, puts them on a good trajectory and gets them to advance sooner than people who don't necessarily have that same level of exposure that you get at a liberal arts college. And so I think that the physics major is very valuable. I'm biased on that front, obviously, but the liberal arts really adds to that and gives a lot of additional skills that really makes them a much stronger candidate and makes them overall tend to be very successful in their careers,
Great. Thank you very much.
whatever that happens to be.
And I think that's one of the really interesting questions, right? Whatever that happens to be. And one of the things that Dean and I value so much about smaller colleges are the transformative stories that we hear from people because of the deep personal relationships that are developed and the opportunity to do really interesting things. So I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a story or two of a Wittenberg student who started in your classroom or lab and then went on to do something really remarkable as a result of that experience and the relationship that you were able to develop.
I knew this question was coming. So to prepare for this, I listened to several previous editions of this podcast, and that's a common question. And it's hard because from my perspective, what I really want for my students right? Whether I have them in one class or I have them working with me on a research project, or I have them in several classes. What I really want is and I think that this is why colleges exist, is to become educated, contributing, participating citizens, and to do something meaningful, whatever that happens to be, right? And I am not a particularly religious person, but it very much ties into the Lutheran idea of vocation, right? Which is not what everyone thinks of as vocation's a job. Vocation is taking your skills and applying them to have a positive impact on the world. And so, on some level, all of my students have been remarkable because they've all gone off and done great things, right? Whether they came in really strong and then sort of crashed and burned, and then they went out and they found their right niche and did great, or the student who came in and just struggled but just kept plugging away and ultimately found something good, or someone they come in and I don't know what happens, but there's some magic sauce where suddenly their engine turns on and you're just like, wow, I don't know what happened, but this is amazing. So all of my students really are sort of in that remarkable category for me, but that I have maybe a slightly different definition of what that is. But I will point to one, and this is not necessarily a remarkable accomplishment, but I think it's something that points to a really nice aspect of one of the things that we do in our curriculum. So we have a junior and senior seminar. It's a one credit course over the entire year. So they take it as juniors and seniors, and it serves sort of multiple purposes. It gives them a chance where all of us are, the entire department, all the majors, the faculty are in one place at one time during the week. So we can communicate sort of events and things that are going on. But the real main focus is to help them develop their communication skills. So we have them giving technical presentations. And in their junior year, it's just on topics that they find interesting. And then as they move into their senior year, it focuses on their research project, which is one of our requirements for graduation. But it also allows us to do other things, talk about what comes next, right? How do you get a job? How do you know, frame the experiences you have in a way that's going to be something that an employer looks at and says, oh, that's exactly what we want. But we also focus on things, we talk about ethics and things like that. And so we had a student went off to graduate school and unfortunately found himself in a situation where his advisor was acting in a really unethical way. And when you're in graduate school, sort of once you're in a research group, it's hard to leave because you sort of get in and starting over usually sets you back a couple of years. And because we had this focused attention where we would dedicate some time every semester to looking at case studies, he walked away from the group. He ended up actually doing plasma physics. So that was kind of cool. And so I was able to see him at several professional meetings after that, which was great. He's now gone off and he's doing a postdoc in Europe. And all in all, really a successful trajectory. But I think that taking the time to sort of step back and then walk away from a situation that was unethical, I think that was remarkable.
Thank you for sharing that. That is remarkable. And I think what we want from all of our students.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's change the topic a little bit. We've been talking about the students, but let's talk a little bit about the institution. I mean, your career has been within a small college, and certainly that's where you started as a student, as well as that small colleges are facing a number of financial pressures,
Yeah.
including some very difficult decisions about budgets and academic programs, faculty positions, and I think this is probably true for a lot of schools.
Yeah.
Wittenberg or like Wittenberg. You had the advantage point both as a professor and an NSF leader. And what do you see as the biggest challenges facing small college today, particularly sustaining strong STEM programs? And to follow up with that, what do you see as the greatest opportunity for them to thrive?
Well, I think they're actually coupled. One way to think about these things is that crises are opportunities for transformative change, right? Looking historically within physics in the around the turn of the 1900s, there was sort of a real crisis because we had these models that describe what's going on and they were inconsistent. And so in some sense, there was sort of a crisis in the field because we had these two competing models. both worked really well, but could not be compatible with each other. And that led to sort of modern physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, things that are crucial in our sort of everyday now, right? But it took that sort of crisis moment to lead to that transformative change. And I think the real point where institutions can get themselves in trouble is when they face these financial problems. And there are lots of reasons for why they exist, and every institution can probably give you several reasons. But I think that the real danger is when institutions lose focus of their mission and their vision and start to try and do short-term fixes, right? We'll create this major because it will bring in new students, but they'd never, no market research is done. It's sort of, we're going to try and put a band-aid on it. And in my experience, it never works, right? The number of students tends to stay the same initially. They just sort of redistribute where they end up within the institution. But the danger there is that as you start to do that, you lose your identity. And that's where things tend to become a real spiral, because without that identity, right, which is based on your mission and your vision, it that's hard to recover. And so I think that that's from my perspective as sort of a faculty member, that's where the real danger spot is. The opportunity, though, is you can focus on who you see yourself as being and who you want to be. And, from my perspective, if we're going to fail, let's fail on our terms, right? And if we're going to go out, let's go out being who we believe we are and what we think is important. So I think that for schools that do that, they tend to be successful, right? And there are lots of examples, right? There are several Christian colleges that is a very big piece of who they are, and they are successful because that's who they are, and that resonates with students, and students come because of that. And so I think that it's an opportunity to focus on that and to sort of double down. And I believe firmly in the liberal arts. So if there's a hill to die on for me, that's one.
I like that. I like that.
We hear this theme about the importance of fidelity to mission and not trying to be something that you're not. So you're certainly reinforcing the theme that we hear with many of our guests, and which I think is important to our listeners. I want to ask you one last question as we wrap our conversation, and really want to kind of look ahead and also invite a personal reflection on your part, Dr. Williams. As you think about your career at Wittenberg, as well as your national work, what excites you most about the future of undergraduate science education? And then the second piece of that is, on a personal level, what's been the most rewarding part of your work and service at Wittenberg?
So that's a good question. I think that in terms of what I think is exciting about STEM education is that right now STEM education is incredibly important. We live in a technologically driven society, and we need to have people who have some understanding of the STEM areas, because that really underlies all of our technology, right? And sort of underpins sort of our society. And because of that, I think that there's a real opportunity to engage more students with this and really prepare them to have meaningful and fulfilling lives. And and looking at this as sort of our needs as a country, there is a real demand for technological employees. And that's not just people with PhDs or masters or bachelors. It includes technicians. It includes people who get their associate's degrees, right? You think about the semiconductor manufacturing, trying to bring that back into the US. Well, you need to have people who can run those machines, right? You need to have people who can advance the technology so that you can build the next generation of computer chips, right? Which means you need to make things smaller so they can be faster. And So from the technician up to the person who's designing the next generation of processes, we need that full spectrum, right? And the same thing is true if you look at energy technology, right? The future of energy technology is not coal. It's going to be renewables. It's going to be fusion. It's going to be fission. And there's lots of overlap between the semiconductor manufacturing and the clean energy technologies, right? And we do not have enough people to meet that demand if you look at the projections. And so I think that beyond just sort of having an educated populace who understands some underlying scientific, we can really sort of help prepare the next generation workforce. And I think that that's really important. And I think that's exciting. It's an opportunity. And I have to admit, I forgot the second part of your question.
The second part is just sort of a personal reflection on what has been most sort of gratifying about your time at Wittenberg as both a teacher and a advisor and a researcher and a relationship builder.
I would say the mentoring, and that really encompasses all aspects, right? When it comes to my teaching, I don't actually teach the students anything, right? Learning has to be done by the person doing it. If I could just watch something and be really good at it, I would be really good at insert your favorite sport here. I am not very good at whatever that sport happens to be, right? But what I do as an instructor is create the environment, I provide the scaffolding so that the students, when they are ready, they feel safe to take that intellectual risk that's necessary to learn. All right. And if we're doing our job right, that will lead to them becoming lifelong learners. And that's what they really need for going forward, right? I could train them for their first job, but if that's what I was doing, I would be doing a real disservice because they'll get their first job, but in 5 years, they're going to be in a different career, right? In 15 years, they may be working in an area that doesn't even exist right now. No one has any idea what that is. And so the mentoring is what I really love, right? Whether it's working with them in the lab, whether it's advising them on their courses, sort of talking them through what they might want to do next, right? Where really all I'm being is a sounding board or working with them in the classroom. I'm really there to be a mentor. And that's the part of the job that I really love. And that's what I would like to keep doing.
And it's such an important part of what small colleges across this country do. So I'm so glad that we're able to end on that note and the importance of mentoring at small colleges. Dr. Williams, thank you very much for being with us today. For those of you who are listening, if you'd like to learn more about Small College America, we invite you to go to smallcollegeamerica.net, where you can find details about upcoming episodes, connect with us, and suggest topics or subjects for future conversations. This episode of Small College America is made possible with underwriting support from Perspective Data Science, a firm specializing in AI-powered tools and data solutions, including the Financial Compass platform. On behalf of our guest, Dr. Jeremiah Williams from Wittenberg University, and my co-host, Dean Hope, and myself, Kent Barnes, thank you for listening.